When my mother remarried, I told myself it wouldn't change much. I was already an adult, living my own life, and the idea of a stepbrother felt distant, just a label, nothing more. He was a stranger, someone I saw at family gatherings, exchanged polite words with, and then moved on. But things never stay simple. At first, he was just there, an occasional presence at dinners, family trips, holiday gatherings. We were civil, friendly even, but never close. He had his life, and I had mine. But over time, small things started shifting. The way he looked at me lingered a second too long. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me, like I was someone special. I ignored it, convinced I was imagining things. Maybe I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that I was reading into something that wasn't there. But then came the moments I couldn't explain away. The way he stood a little too close when we talked. The way his hand brushed against mine, not accidentally, but intentionally. The way he'd glance at my lips when I spoke. It was wrong, I told myself. Completely and utterly wrong. But the more I tried to push it away, the more aware I became of him. I started noticing his presence in a way I hadn't before. The way he carried himself, confident, composed, like he knew exactly who he was. He wasn't like the men I had dated, unsure and hesitant. He knew what he wanted. And when he looked at me, I felt like he wanted me. I hated how much I thought about him. Late at night, I'd lie awake replaying conversations in my head. The way he made me laugh, the way he listened when I spoke. The way he said my name, like it meant something more. I told myself it was just curiosity, a fleeting thought that would pass. But deep down, I knew the truth. The first time I caught myself dressing with him in mind, I felt a wave of guilt. I wasn't supposed to care what he thought. I wasn't supposed to wonder if he'd notice how my dress hugged my figure, if he'd catch the scent of my perfume when I walked past. But I did.
And he noticed.
One evening, at a family gathering, the air between us shifted. A look held a second too long. A silence that spoke louder than words. He reached past me for something, his arm brushing against mine, and I felt it. The spark, the tension, the thing neither of us dared to name. I should have stepped away. I should have drawn a line. Instead, I stood there, my breath caught, my pulse racing. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just in my head. This was real. And it was only the beginning. I told myself it was nothing. A fleeting moment. A trick of the mind. But the way my body reacted when he was near told me otherwise. Every glance, every accidental touch, every word he spoke with that quiet confidence only pulled me in deeper. I started testing boundaries without meaning to, my hand lingering on his arm a second too long when I laughed. Standing a little too close when no one was looking. Holding his gaze, waiting for him to look away first. He never did. The tension became unbearable. It wasn't just attraction. It was something heavier, something neither of us dared to name. It followed us everywhere, thick in the air, impossible to ignore. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened when someone else had my attention. I felt it when his fingers brushed against mine in passing, a silent promise, a quiet warning. One evening, we found ourselves alone. It shouldn't have meant anything. We'd been alone before. But this time, the air was different.
Charged.
Unstable. He stood close, too close, his gaze locked onto mine. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the slow rise and fall of his breath. Every rational thought told me to move, to leave, to break whatever spell had woven itself around us. But I couldn't. Then he said my name. Just my name. But it wasn't casual. It wasn't harmless. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my throat. We shouldn't, I whispered, the words trembling on my lips. He smirked, not in amusement but in understanding. As if he knew I wasn't telling him no. I was telling myself. Then tell me to stop. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because I didn't want him to stop. He reached for me, slow and deliberate, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers traced the line of my jaw, down to my collarbone, featherlight but searing. My breath hitched, my body betraying me. And then he leaned in, his lips a whisper away from mine. The moment stretched, suspended in time. I could have stepped back. I could have ended it there. Instead, I closed the distance. The second our lips met, the world tilted. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was controlled, calculated. A test. A question. I answered with the way my fingers curled into his shirt, with the way my body pressed against his. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine, waiting for regret, hesitation, anything that would tell him to walk away. But all I felt was need. It should have scared me. It didn't. Because now that I had tasted what I'd been craving, there was no turning back. The days that followed were a blur. The moments we shared became my obsession. Each stolen glance, every lingering touch, felt like a secret only we knew. My world shifted in a way I couldn't explain, and it scared me. But what scared me more was how much I wanted it to keep happening. I was living two lives now, one where everything appeared normal, where I smiled at my family and went through the motions of daily life. And then there was the other life, the one that lived in the stolen moments with him. The moments that no one else could understand. The moments where I was finally seen, finally desired. I kept telling myself that it wasn't real, that it was a mistake, something temporary. But the more we exchanged glances, the more we spoke in quiet whispers, the harder it became to believe that. The distance between us, when we weren't together, felt unbearable. I started counting the minutes until I could see him again, until I could feel that rush of excitement and fear, the intoxicating mix of guilt and desire. But it wasn't just physical, it was the way he made me feel alive, like I was something more than I had been before. It was the way he listened to me, the way he saw me in a way no one else did. And yet, the guilt never fully left. When I was with him, the world disappeared. But when I was apart from him, it came crashing down. I couldn't stop thinking about the lies I was telling, the secrets I was keeping. The fear of getting caught lingered in the back of my mind. The fear that what I was doing could destroy everything I had worked for. But the desire, the need to feel something real, overshadowed everything else. I found myself looking for more ways to be near him. Conversations stretched longer, moments of silence more charged. A touch of the hand here, a brush of the shoulder there. Every time it happened, my body responded before I could stop it, each time feeling more out of control, more dangerous. I noticed the change in him, too. He became more possessive, more certain in his actions. His gaze would linger just a little longer, his touch more insistent. And when he smiled at me, I could see it. He knew. He knew that I wasn't just playing along. I was as consumed by this as he was. I started to question everything. Could I keep living this lie? Could I continue to balance my two worlds without losing myself in the process? It felt like I was teetering on the edge, a decision waiting to be made, but I wasn't sure which side I would fall on. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of the consequences, terrified of losing everything I had. But even more terrified of the idea that if I stopped, I would lose him. I couldn't walk away, not yet. Not when every part of me was drawn to him. The truth always catches up. I tried to believe that I could keep up the charade, that the world I had built around this secret wouldn't come crashing down. But it did, and when it did, it shattered everything. I couldn't hide the changes. The way I moved, the way I spoke, it was different. I was different. Every time I saw him, I felt the tension in my chest, the weight of what we had become, and it was impossible to ignore. What we were doing, it wasn't a fleeting thing. It wasn't something I could brush off as a mistake. It had become a part of me, part of my every thought, my every action. But the guilt, the shame, it followed me everywhere. I couldn't look at my family without feeling the burden of the lies I had woven. I couldn't smile at them without knowing I was hiding the truth that could destroy everything. And it terrified me. I thought about leaving, about walking away from him. But the moment I tried, I felt an ache in my chest, a pull that was stronger than any fear or guilt. He was the only person who made me feel alive, the only person who made me feel like I mattered. The thought of losing that, of losing him, was unbearable. But the truth was creeping closer. My husband started to notice. The late nights, the change in my demeanor, the way I was no longer fully present with him. He asked questions subtle at first, then more direct. He could feel it. He could see the shift, even if he didn't know the details. The moment he confronted me was inevitable. I had seen the signs, felt the shift in his eyes when he looked at me. But nothing could prepare me for the weight of his words. "Is there someone else?" It was as if time stopped. My heart pounded in my ears. I opened my mouth to speak, to deny it, but the words got stuck in my throat. I couldn't lie anymore.
Not to him.
Not to myself. He already knew. And I realized then that I had already made my choice. I felt like I was suffocating, caught between the life I had, the life I was losing, and the one I couldn't stop craving. I wanted to fight for what I had, for the life I had built, but I also knew that what I had with him, was something I couldn't just walk away from. But my actions had consequences, and I was finally forced to face them. The man I had married, the person I had promised to be faithful to, was no longer a part of my world. And even though I had chosen this path, even though I had made the decision to be with him, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of loss. What started as a spark, a moment of weakness, had consumed me. I had let myself fall, let myself become someone I barely recognized. And now, standing in the aftermath, I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. I had no idea how to put myself back together. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. But the question remained, was it worth it?